Because, Professor, I went to a French school, and my teachers, they would go on strike all the time. And you see the Yellow Vest movement in France. One gets a sense that direct action is a lot more ingrained and internalized in the French mentality. Do you think that's something that's missing in the United States? A lesson that can be learned, perhaps, from that culture?
Absolutely. I am jealous as an American of the Yellow Vest movement. I understand that there are all different wings of the Yellow Vest movement, that there are right-wing people involved, left-wing, and Le Pen has people that are in there. And my guess is that the Communist Party does too, and everything else, as they fight out what that movement will be, what it will do. And I'm just grateful it's there. I'm grateful that they were able to sustain their activity for that length of time, that they were not disrupted by the crude and thankfully incompetent efforts of Mr. Macron, who is a gift to our side if ever you wanted one. For me, yes, the best thing I can say is I'm jealous. The United States doesn't have that tradition. It doesn't get people out into the street. It doesn't seem to learn that when it does that, it gets results it cannot get any other way. It doesn't learn it from what's going on in France. These two countries have very different traditions of political consciousness, political activity. I was influenced quite a bit in my intellectual development by a French philosopher named Louis Althusser. And he's not alive anymore, but I did work with him years ago in Paris. I should explain. My father was born in France. I've spoken French since I've been a child. So I speak the language. So I have access to the, yes. And part of my family are Parisian, it's a long relationship. So I study and I follow French politics. I was a visiting professor at the Sorbonne back in the 1990s. So for me, it is an amazing politicized culture. I remember as a young man, my first time going to visit my family in France. I was born here in the United States and lived here all my life, but I have a French family. The dinner table conversation was something I had never experienced here in the United States. The ease and comfort with which political differences were put out on the table and argued by people who kissed each other before they began the conversation and kissed each other when it was over. But that didn't mean that they didn't take these differences seriously. They did. This was all a wonderment to me and got me terribly excited about difference that you could think about and that you could wonder about. And my hope is that this can be changed, that the United States can learn these kinds of things. For example, I talk about, and I did a little bit more when they were more active, I have a radio and TV program I do here in the country every week for half an hour. And I used to regularly keep my listeners and viewers up to date by talking about the Yellow Vest movement. I even got on one occasion a gilet jaune, which I put on so I could show people what it actually looked like. But yes, I think the cultures are very, very different. You can't do in France what you do here. You could not have told 30 million French men and women that they're fired, they have no job, they should go be in addition to being terrified about the virus, they should be terrified about whether they'll ever have a job back. I mean, you couldn't do that. They'd be in the streets, it'd be over. Mr. Macron would be what he deserves, which is disparu, it's over. But in this country, because of the different history, not only do we have nothing in the streets, but we have an organized labor movement, the AFL-CIO, that to this day never once organized any public action against any action of Donald Trump or against this unemployment. I mean, even when the government, Mr. Trump, didn't pay public employees for several weeks a couple of years ago, when no working man or woman would have objected to a demonstration saying you cannot order people to come into work and not pay. You can't do that. They didn't do it. They didn't do it because the labor movement is so riven with its own differences, so compromised by the appeal of a Donald Trump, that it was afraid to make those differences public by calling a demonstration that a third or more of its members would have objected to. It is extraordinary. And the labor movement in this country has never had and never understood the need for a systematic ally on the political left. They don't get it. They think that what happens when you go on strike is just a result of what the issues of the strike are. They're not paying you enough, or they're making you pay extra for your medical care, or whatever the issues are. And those are, of course, always important parts of the story. But what they just don't get is that the broader ideological formation of the population is just as important. When that worker goes home and talks to his wife or her husband, who's not a worker, not about to go on strike, what happens in the bed or over the dinner table, how they see the world, that's going to affect whether that worker goes on strike or not, whether that worker is a militant or not. And you have to work at that like you have to work at everything else, or else that will come and undo what you're trying to do. And the French people have always had the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, the anti-left, the anti-capitalist party, all the different working and doing that all the time in the school, in the university, in the media. And so they have a different popular mentality that gives support to their labor militants that we just don't have that here. We just don't have it.